Hi all. Today we are reviewing a book that may seem out of place for this channel. However, it is a book that I absolutely adore. A Bear Called Paddington, the first in Michael Bond's classic children's series that started it all. I was first introduced to Paddington in 2013 or 2014 in quite an unconventional way. It was around the time that the first trailer for the 2014 film adaptation that was released. So my first encounter with Paddington was through a bunch of memes where people photoshopped a picture of him from the trailer into various horror films. If I remember correctly, I think this trend was called Creepy Paddington. As a lover of all things horror, I thought this juxtaposition was hilarious and even took to making a collage for my desktop background of a bunch of the memes. It wasn't until 8 or 9 years later that I rediscovered the adorable young bear gentleman from Darkest Peru. My partner showed me 2 clips from the Paddington film adaptations, the first being the tiny police bear chase from the 2014 film, and the second being the barbershop debacle from Paddington 2. At the time, I thought it was the LSD I was on that made the film seem so hilarious, but rewatching the films multiple times afterwards, I realized that I had just had a love for Paddington Brown. Next, I watched some of the episodes from the classic 70s Paddington TV series, which blended stop-motion animation and hand-drawn animation to create what I now believe are the most faithful adaptations of Bond's works. After receiving the classic Paddington collection from my parents, I instantly dove into the first book, A Bear Called Paddington. While I had loved all things Paddington so far, I was worried that since it was a children's book, it may not click with me. However, I couldn't have been more wrong. As author Michael Bond states in his postscript, it hadn't been written with any particular age group in mind, which was fortunate because until then I had always written for adults, and if I consciously aimed at a young audience, I might have written down, which is always a bad idea. I think this is one of the reasons Paddington has such a broad appeal and has become an international sensation. A Bear Called Paddington is hands down the funniest book I've ever read. I found myself smiling constantly throughout and chuckled a bunch at the crazy shenanigans of Mr. Paddington Brown. In A Bear Called Paddington, I read the birth of all the Paddington lore I had come to love. Marmalade sandwiches, hard stairs, Paddington's classic red hat from his uncle, Aunt Lucy in the Home for Retired Bears in Lima, the Please Look After This Bear tag, Paddington's blue duffel coat, and Paddington being a slow reader, just like I am. All the Paddington essentials are created right here in this first novel. A Bear Called Paddington introduces us to all the important characters, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, Jonathan and Judy, the Brown's grumpy neighbor, Mr. Curry, as well as Paddington's closest friend, Mr. Gruber. In the postscript, Bond writes about these 2 pals, explaining Paddington's best friend, Mr. Gruber, is important because he knows what it is like to be a refugee in a strange country, so they have a special relationship. I found this relationship was downplayed in the 2 film adaptations, but I am also happy to have gone back and learned of the strong camaraderie between the 2 characters who have struggled with adapting to a new place. One of the things I find most intriguing about Paddington's adventures is that things never seem to go as planned, but the characters always find joy in the chaos. So many children's stories introduce a problem and then have the characters resolve it so the outcome is what they wanted all along. That rarely happens in Paddington. Paddington always tries his best, but does not often succeed. But that's okay, because he has friends and family who love him for his differences and eccentricities. In a similar way to how I related strongly to Frankenstein's monster in Mary Shelley's classic novel, I find myself relating to Paddington since he is an outsider. Throughout the novel, the local residents constantly make note of the strangeness of seeing a bear, and some, such as Mr. Curry, even take a disliking to Paddington for this, rudely, but also comically calling him Bear throughout the various iterations of Paddington. Despite being different, Paddington is always polite and tries his best, which more often than not leads to him gaining the respect of others, despite his many blunders. Even though Paddington tries his best, he is prone to bending the rules, which Bond does a great job of showing sometimes should be broken. As stated in the first novel, Paddington was a surprising bear in many ways, and he had a strong sense of right and wrong. Paddington brings a different perspective to the stuffy Brits he encounters throughout the various escapades, many of whom need their narrow mindsets to be challenged. As I stated before, Paddington is always polite, even though he has different cultural norms for things such as eating, which the Browns learn to respect. As someone with OCD who engages in a bunch of out-of-the-ordinary rituals, such as using plastic cutlery and Tupperware for all my food, always showering before bed, and never sitting on furniture other than my bed while wearing pajamas, this was yet another reality of Paddington's situation that I found to be most relatable. Paddington has obviously had a huge impact not only on my life, but on the lives of his fans across the globe. A Bear Called Paddington definitely ranks in my top 10 favorite books of all time for its witty humor, spunky characters, and most of all, its wholesome heart. If I'm being honest, top 5? Yeah. Top 3? Probably. I would like to end this review with a quote from the end of author Michael Bond's postscript. Paddington was and always will be very real to me. He has his feet firmly on the ground, and he has a very strong sense of right and wrong. So much so that when I come up against a problem in my own life, I often ask myself, what would he do? I've been asking myself this same question as I've tried more and more in recent months to be a better person. I think we could all learn a lot from A Bear Called Paddington. Doomgrips, out.